Okay, everybody, thanks so much for making the trip across. This is the last Q&A session of the day. We'll have much more tomorrow, so do drop by. I'll throw the floor open. If you have any questions for Mike, just raise your hand. I'll find you with the audience. I'll find you with the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, a hand, please, for Mike Massimino.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for coming.
Hello, Professor. Whoa, this is loud. All right, I've got a question for you. You already answered part of this, but apart from your scientific answer to extraterrestrial life that you just announced, did you ever had a aha moment in space that would give you goosebumps about there might be other life? This kind of experience?
Like, did I see aliens in space?
Or
come out and say it.
Yeah.
Just come out and ask me.
Also that.
No, I didn't see anything. I'm sorry. So what did I ever have an aha moment?
Yeah, just a feeling maybe. But while you're looking out, you got a epiphany or something.
No, I mean I think as far as in regard to life other places, you get the sense, or I got the sense more when I was there looking at the planet of how we're sort of part of the universe. So when we're here on the planet walking around, you know, before my experience in space, and really before, even after I was in space, but once I spacewalked, where you really get this huge view of what's happening. Up till then, you're looking through a window, and it's amazing. But when you get outside, it's like being inside the house, looking out the window at the playground, and then going outside. You're in the playground. Everything opens up, and you're kind of in between the planet, which is still very close to you, of course, and everything else that's out there. And so I got this sense that where we are is we're part of this whole universe. You know, we have our place here where we are in our solar system, and we have our sun and the planets that also orbit with us, and we have our moon. But we're just one neighborhood, and there's this huge universe out there with all these other possibilities. So I think that was it. Is that I see us more as all of us as space travelers, and this happens to be where we live. This is our spaceship that's taken us through this journey that we're on, with all the other planets and stars and galaxies and who else is out there. So I think that's kind of what I felt is a different perspective on who we are. As far as I was kind of joking about the alien. I didn't see anything that would say, "Oh, what's that?" I didn't see anything that couldn't be explained. Let's put it that way.
Hey, Mike. So as a Canadian, Chris Hadfield, who's kind of our national treasure, in his book, he describes this superhuman level of perseverance that most astronauts have. So I was kind of curious to hear your perspective on that. Like, when things get tough, when it's high-stress situations, how do you get through it?
I think, and Chris is a good guy. He's featured in that show as well, and I like to call him a North American, so we can have a piece of him too here in America. You know, he's a great guy, good friend, great astronaut too, and so that perseverance, I think, is important. I think what everyone here is doing, whether you're developing a new product or whatever you're doing with yourself, passion, perseverance are very important, and so what happened to me is, on my journey to becoming an astronaut, there were times I got rejected 3 times from NASA, and the 3rd time I was medically disqualified. I had a problem with my eyesight, and I had to figure out a way to get over that, and I reached out to some eye doctors who helped me through some vision training, improve my vision. They didn't accept LASIK or other things that they do accept now. This is over 20 years ago. And I was able to re-qualify and then have another chance to be an astronaut, and I got picked on that next chance. And there are times where you think the door is totally closed, and that was one example. I thought, you can keep getting rejected, I guess, from being an astronaut forever. They say, well, we don't want you, but once you're medically DQ'd, it's kind of like, well, we can't even consider you anymore. We can't even look at your application. So that was very disappointing. But what I found always helped me whether it was a struggle I had when I was in elementary school or high school, college, grad school, even with the problems I had, my challenges in applying to become an astronaut, was reaching out for help and getting help from a friend or a teacher or whoever I could, a mentor, get someone to help me and realize that you're not in this game alone, that there's people there to help you, and then try to help people where you can. So for me, I always looked at life and things as a team game, and then whenever I felt that I was by myself and totally alone in whatever I was doing, that's when things weren't going well. That wasn't a good plan. And I found that reaching out and getting help and approaching it more from, even if it was something that just had to do with me getting help, was the key for me. And what I found interesting, and I read a little about this in my book. You mentioned Chris's book as well. And what I found interesting is I think it's those qualities that once you get to where you want to go, once you're successful in your business, once you get the position you want, in my case, I wanted to be an astronaut. Once you get there, even though it seems like you've reached a destination, really you just started, right? You get in there and you haven't even done anything yet. Now it's time to perform, right? You get your business where it is, or you get your position that you want, or you're where you are. Now it's time to perform and see what you can do with it. And those lessons that you learned along the way in perseverance are what you're going to need to make you successful once you get to your destination. And so I found that was very helpful for me, going through those experiences, those disappointments, and figuring out a way to never give up. That was what I needed when I was an astronaut, when I was in space working on the Hubble and we ran into problems. It was that same sort of perseverance that was key. What did he call it? It was
it's like a superhuman perseverance.
Superhuman perseverance. Yeah, that's kind of, I mean, I don't know if it's certainly, I don't know if superhuman is a pretty cool word, maybe a big word to use or a couple words to use, but I think that's kind of a good way to look at it, that it's no matter what that obstacle is, there's a way around it. And it might seem that there isn't, and you might say, come on, you're full of it. But I think there really is. And you just might have to be a little patient. You might have to look at the problem a little bit differently. In my case, it was finding help, talking to people about it. Because most obstacles, in some ways, other people have encountered, and no matter what it is, and you can get help, or people are ready to help you in whatever you need. Remember, there's help available, I guess, is what I would say. And don't give up. You can't control the outcome, but you can control the effort. And just keep at things. And if it never happens, it never happens. But you just keep trying, I guess, is the way to look at it.
Okay. Thanks, Mike, for a very inspirational talk. Can you talk a little bit more about the research you're doing now at Columbia, and what are some of the hard problems you're solving to help astronauts to do space travel?
Yeah. Well, at Columbia, I don't have a lab. I'm not a research professor. I teach. So I do some teaching. I work with students. I work on a little bit of research in robotics. Some of the problems that we're working on, some stuff that I'm interested in, I may work a little bit in, but that bigger problems that people are working on now for keeping people healthy and alive in space, understanding some of the medical issues that are going on right now with astronauts. The space station is a great place for us to get time in space about what the effects of zero gravity are on people and keeping people off the planet for a long time, for longer periods of time. And so with that comes things like psychological support and physical health, protection from the hazards of space flight. I think for us to make the next step, which is to go to some sort of planetary body like the moon, I think that's our next place to go. And to do that, I think the problems we're going to be working on are radiation protection, how to work in a little bit of gravity. We know we can work in 1 gravity, we can work in 0 gravity, but settling and putting a place either on Mars or the moon where there's partial gravity, dealing with rocks and land, and how to build a habitat. I think those are going to be the challenges coming up. But what I do, I enjoy working with my students on a variety of projects. A lot of them are mainly NASA-sponsored projects, competitions that they're doing, designing space tools for the future. What's interesting about university work, when I was with NASA, it was always solving the problem that we have, like right now, that needs to be solved tomorrow or today, and it's very practical. Whereas with what I find interesting about university work is that you're looking a little bit further beyond that. So we're looking at tools that might be used when we go back to the moon, or ways in which we can use the soil on Mars to build a habitat, or how do we grow plants and food? They've done that on the space station, but how can we do that somewhere else on another planet? So I kind of like that. I kind of looking at things that are further out in the future. That's some of the problems we're looking at. Some more near term, but also those of where we're going to be 20 or 30 years from now.
Hi, Mike. Thank you. I had a chance to meet your colleague, Dr. Yvonne Kegel, a little while ago. Super inspiring.
Today?
Oh,
She's
no,
here?
no, not today.
All right.
But she's gotten me completely obsessed with space physiology, especially with the idea of thinking about raising children and having multi-generational kind of space, continuation of human civilization beyond, perhaps our solar system. All sorts of issues with zero and limited gravity environments in terms of developmental biology, physiology, mentally as well. What do you think are the chances of us really achieving a hospitable environment for future generations to go into? Would you even want that for, kids of the future to be born and raised out there?
I think inevitably that's going to happen as we continue to move off our planet step by step. So I think eventually there'll be people born there or somewhere else other than being born on Earth and maybe raised there. I think eventually that might happen. It's a long way off, but I think that's eventually gonna be the case. It's hard for me to imagine me doing that because I think I'm still pretty attached to our planet. And I like going into space for visits and to do some work, but I also wanted to come home. And I think, though, maybe future generations, as the young people here like yourself, are a little bit more accustomed to being away. I mean, my generation, you travel more than I do, right? I didn't go on an airplane until I was 19 years old, for example. I grew up in Long Island. Like, a big trip was to go to the Bronx because it involved a bridge, So I think, I'm used to hanging around the neighborhood, and so I think that as our world gets smaller in those respects, that as people travel more as younger people, as you get more exposure to the world, as the internet brings us places, I think we'll see this place more and more as our neighborhood being the Earth, and when we leave it, it'll be going somewhere else. So I think that's inevitably what's going to happen. I think that's an okay thing. I don't think we'll do anything really bad, like be catastrophic. I think that it won't be. I don't think it's going to be a bad thing. I think it'll be, when the time comes, it'll almost be. I think it'll be a natural way of leaving. But that's what I've noticed over in my lifetime and my time as an astronaut. We were taking those steps to leave. We had. The missions we had in the 60s and 70s, and the space station now is a place where we have people living off the planet. I think our next step is going to be the moon. In my opinion, that's, I think, where we're going to be, and then maybe Mars after that. And we're taking those steps of moving further and further away. And eventually, maybe we will be having people live other places and maybe never being here on Earth or coming to Earth just for a visit.
We have time for one or two more questions.
Thank you. Sir, earlier today you mentioned that you think of yourself as a citizen of the Earth. So I think that's a natural progression. We thought of ourselves as villagers, then as citizens of nations, and now some thinkers like yourself are thinking globally. So my question is, how can we propagate those ideas, and what do you think is the best way to accelerate that kind of thinking across the species?
I think one way is, which is kind of difficult maybe, is to get more and more people there. I also think conferences like this increase our understanding of other cultures, and there's people from around the world, I'm sure, right here in this audience, right? And the Web Summit in Lisbon that I've been to is kind of the same thing. I think that our universities, like where I teach at Columbia, is very international. I think the more understanding we can have of each other as people from different cultures, different parts of the world, the better off we're going to be. I think the harder thing that I think would really help accelerate it is if we get more people into space. But I think as we do that more, as we get more and more people there, and I do think though that even if we're only sending a few people like we are now, and I think we are going to be sending a lot more very soon as the private companies kick in more and more. But I think with what we have with the internet and social media and these other things help more and more people to engage in that and kind of see us as one entity. Now politically that might not always work. You know, I think there's probably a lot of obstacles there that I don't know very much about, but I observe, I guess. But I think the more and more we can learn how to work together, and I always felt that space projects was a great way for people who might not have that much in common to work together. And I think an example of that is the International Space Station, where we have the United States and Russia. We get along very well with our Russian cosmonauts, and engineers and instructors from each country get along really well because we have that common goal. Countries of Europe, Japan, Canada, and other countries of the world, not everybody, but a lot of countries are involved. And I think that's a very good example. And I would like to see space travel become more and more that way. I think one of the greatest benefits we have is international cooperation in the space program. So I think it'd be great to get everyone off the planet and take a look at what it's like and get that sense like I had. But I think that day hopefully is coming where more and more people are going to have that opportunity. But regardless of that, I think things like this where you can share ideas across cultures and find that common ground. And I think technology is one way to do it. Space, for sure. I think those are going to help us get there.
Yeah. Hi, Mike. I have a very similar question I had. So how can we inspire the next generation of, as you said, captains of spaceship Earth, right? How can we get them excited about space exploration? But again, about our own planet, right? A lot of people take it for granted, and how can we solve that?
I think we do, but maybe we do take it for granted, you know. And when you see its fragility. You also see the thinness of our atmosphere, because the atmosphere shows up as a thin band around our planet. You can see it if you look tangentially at the horizon. You'll see this, and you'll see it in the pictures as well. At night, it looks kind of like a bluish green, more greenish. During the day shots, it's a blue like the blue sky, and it's thin. If you compare the atmosphere, the size of the atmosphere to the size of our planet, if you think of our planet as an onion, the top layer of the onion is the relationship size-wise of our atmosphere to our planet. That's how thin our atmosphere is. I have a lot of hope in the young people, from my own kids who are kind of near the early 20s, kind of like, seems like a lot of people around that age here, maybe a little older. But I think they've grown up with more of an awareness of how important it is to take care of the planet and to be good citizens. In my perspective, when I was a kid, it's much different now. I think we have made a lot of progress. And I think the more we understand of what's happening, the better off we're gonna be. I also think that the way information has traveled and the way people learn about things. I saw Neil Armstrong walk on the moon when I was 6 years old. I did not see that happen again, I don't think, for maybe, I don't know, 20 years. I mean, when did the internet come around? They weren't showing that thing over and over. Maybe they were when it happened. But now you can get on your phone and watch it right now as I'm talking. And so people now can engage in these things instantaneously. And what I've noticed is the students I have at Columbia, for example, that I'm working some of these problems on that we talked about earlier, they are just as excited about being a part of space travel as I was when I was their age. Probably maybe even more so now, because there's more options. It's not just NASA, it's also private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, where they can go and do exciting things and push the future of space travel. So I think just by the way things are going, the technology that we have, the information, the way it's exchanged, I think it gives people more opportunities to participate. The number of astronaut applications went from, in one selection over a few years, went from 6,000 to the last selection, they had 18,000 applications. And they got so many of them, they didn't know what they were going to do. Because they have to read all of them. And they somehow figured out a way to do that. But I think that's a result of awareness of what's happening and people thinking that it's more engageable and seeing what's out there. And I think just the way we trade information and the internet has helped with that.
Folks, that is it for the Q&A stage today. Thanks so much for dropping by. We're back tomorrow. Give it up for Mike. Back tomorrow at 11 with Damon Waynes Jr. We also have Brad Smith of Microsoft and some other guests throughout the day. Check the app. Make the most out of your time at Collision. Enjoy the night summit if you're there. And behave yourselves. Thanks.